Hi there. This is a continuation of the cast profile series that I've been making for the Game of Thrones prequel series, House of the Dragon. In this one, I'm going to discuss Fabien Frankel as Ser Criston Cole of the Kingsguard. Now, as I explained in my preceding video, I started this profile series back in the spring, and I got through Daemon and Rhaenyra and mostly Alicent. Then we started getting spy reports from active filming, and I had to drop what I was doing to report on that. Then, just as I was catching up, the first teaser trailer came out. It's all this filming news, all the other stuff, and I'm doing hour-long deep dives onto the core 7 cast members. I explained I'm not going to do this for everyone, just for the core 7, who they initially announced in December and February. And I'm going down that list. I make like casting announcement videos for the small council people, but this is the core 7. And they just announced who's playing young Mysaria for like an episode or two. And I hadn't gotten to Mysaria yet, and she's on the list of 7. So I just made a quick audio-only combined, this is young and adult Mysaria. Because in my notes, it's Mysaria and Criston Cole were relatively short. So I'm not going to do video clips for them. It's not as big of a character, but I wanted to make a standalone video on, wow, these people have been announced. Because I'm still catching up on all the announcement videos. What's left? Well, I have to wrap up I did the Alicent showreel clips. I have to do the Alicent analysis video, which is a full hour long, because she's the new Lena Headey. She's the new faction leader, major character on this. She merits a deep dive. Then from the February casting wave, I'm going to do a quick one on the Corlys actor, because I already did an hour-long one on Corlys, the character, because of the race stuff. The big ones left, because I'm scratching off Mysaria and Criston from the list, because they were short, I could burn them off. The two big ones after that I will make showreel clips for and analysis are Rhys Ifans as Otto Hightower and Eve Best as Rhaenys Velaryon. And then I'll be caught up. I'm just trying to scratch stuff off the list here, because of the new casting, I already did a Mysaria one, so I said burn off the Criston Cole one. Same weekend, because it's here, and it's short. Because they cast a relative unknown who has professional actor training. He's just fresh out of school for this. So let me quickly go over Fabien Frankel. The Olivia Cook profile I made is me talking about Alicent for 20 minutes and Olivia Cook for 40 minutes and saying how she fits the role. Fabian's just starting out, but I'm really encouraged by him. Here's his background. He graduated from the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art in 2014. It's prestigious. He's got very formal acting training. And in 2017, he graduated from the London Academy of Music and Dramatic Art. He has a BA in professional acting from 2017. So this is a very trained actor. It's just he graduated 4 years ago from a very prestigious acting school. The big selling point, though, is according to IMDb, he holds an advanced level 3 single sword stage combat degree with Examiner's Gold Star Award. So he has an advanced stage swordplay degree, which is vital for playing Criston Cole, who is the greatest warrior of his generation. That he can even beat Daemon Targaryen in a melee. I mean, with difficulty, and because he's using a Morning Star in that fight, which was an unusual weapon, but even with a sword, he is just the best fighter of his generation. Comparable to Jaime Lannister before he lost his hand, where it's just, you will die if you fight this guy to the death in single combat. He's that good. And in the whole, Barristan is older, so he's not as fast as before. Like, maybe Harold Westerling is a little better than him in his youth, comparably, but you need someone with sword experience to play Criston Cole. And I know the whole, well, there was argument years ago when they were casting Jaime Lannister, cast someone who knows swordplay well because he's that good. Then again, Jaime doesn't have that many swordplay scenes on screen before he loses his hand. That given that they didn't do the Battle of the Whispering Wood on screen, he only has one fight scene, and you could get cast an actor based on their ability and then train them really well for 1-2-minute fight scene. You can do that. Criston, though, he gets into a lot of fight scenes. So it's vital that you have someone with a high degree of stage swordplay proficiency. So I think that's part of the reason he was cast. On top of that, everyone who saw his promo photo when the casting news came out in February said, he really looks like what we mentally envisioned Criston Cole looking like. And how artwork has depicted Criston Cole, that it says it doesn't quite describe his skin tone, but it says he has coal black hair, green eyes, and he's not this pale white Targaryen looking guy. He's got this, the tall, dark, and handsome look going on. So a lot of people already in cartoons and artwork have already depicted this is what Criston Cole should look like. And I'm saying, to me, he really looks like what I thought Criston Cole looks like. As for his acting career, he's only been in the business for like 4 years. Ironically, well, coincidentally, his first on-screen role was a bit part in the 2019 film Last Christmas, starring Emilia Clarke, where for like one scene he was someone she was dating. For like we couldn't even find clips of this, so it's a minor role, but he was in it. He was also in the 2019 NYPD Blue TV movie about Theo Sipowicz, the son of Andy Sipowicz. So he's been in a few TV projects before, 1 or 2 things before this, but he graduated from RADA, the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art. He's a trained actor, he knows swordplay very well, and he really looks like Criston Cole. And you see why this video is short compared to the hour-long. This is all I have to say about him. As for Criston Cole, the character, I can't get into too much without spoilers, but that he's, I put it in context to the actor, but I don't know much about him. That, he's the kingmaker, he's this man torn between love and duty, except it's a darker version of what goes on with, like, Jorah Mormont, that, no, eventually he turns on Rhaenyra and becomes her bitterest enemy. And that we wonder how the show is going to play that. One of the big examples of the unreliable narrator that will come up in season 1 is, did Rhaenyra break up with him, or did he break up with Rhaenyra? Because the different historical sources give rival accounts. I think she rejected him, though even then there's, well, did she reject him because she was arrogant, or because she said, if you break your Kingsguard vows, what guarantee do I have that you wouldn't break your marriage vows? That how could I marry a man if the only way you could marry me is to do something so dishonorable as to break your vows? So there's leeway on, even if she technically rejected him, well, why did she reject him? Whatever the case, that they said a couple of days later was the arranged marriage wedding feast between Rhaenyra and Laenor, where they had a tourney melee to celebrate, and they said he came out into the melee in a black fury. He maimed half a dozen men, and he beat Laenor's lover to death in the melee. Joffrey Lonmouth, he just killed him in the middle of the melee. It was a very big controversy that if he broke up with her, he wouldn't be in this black fury of betrayal and be so driven to turn on her like that and become Alicent's great champion. So he's a really conflicted character. There's shades of Jaime Lannister in this. There's shades of Jorah Mormont and a couple of other characters, are just the conflicted dark side of the whole trope of courtly love, of loving the woman I can't have, who I'm the bodyguard for, that it drives him to the other extreme. And I wonder how they're going to play this in the show, or like, given that they seem to be expanding Harold Westerling, who's the old Lord Commander of the Kingsguard. I've said before, is it going to be like an Obi-Wan and Anakin thing, where Harold is his Obi-Wan, urging him to do the honorable thing, but Anakin swore not to love as a Jedi, and just the restrictions on him, he eventually snaps under all the pressure and all the betrayal and the loves he can't have, and the Anakin goes to the dark side. Is this going to be like Criston Cole going to the dark side? Because he does bad things. He's not an unsympathetic character. Well, he does really bad things, which you no longer sympathize with. But I think Martin set out a realistic path, that he's not a mustache-twirling villain, that there's a reason he went down this dark path. killing an unarmed man who dares speak up that Rhaenyra should be on the throne, and the betrayal and the intrigues. But on the other hand, he's not the most despicable of the people on the side of the Greens. And he's a complicated character, which is why he's interesting, and I hope they do justice to it. The only other issue I have to talk about, really the only issue in this, is their casting description for him. That the way they describe him in their casting announcement is, quote, "Of Dornish descent, Ser Criston is the common-born son of the steward to the Lord of Blackhaven, ruled by House Dondarrion. He has no claim to land or titles. All he has to his name is his honor and his preternatural skill with a sword." Well, unpacking that, in the books it does say, House Cole is a minor vassal in service to House Dondarrion. They're like the Cassells to the Starks. They're the hereditary stewards to Blackhaven under the Dondarrions. So they're a minor family serving the Dondarrions. That's all we know, and that he was the son of the steward. That's all we know about him. The books never say that Ser Criston has some Dornish blood in him. That's an invention of the show. Then again, maybe it's not an invention of the show. Maybe it's just a detail that Martin told them. And we always have to check these things. Remember back in like Game of Thrones seasons 1 and 2, we, in good faith, we assumed that when they invented new major details, it's because it's new information Martin told them. In retrospect, it's stuff they made up haphazardly because they thought it would be a good line, and they weren't even consistent about their own additions. That, like, I know a TV universe like the Marvel Cinematic Universe would be different, but not only were they inventing stuff, they weren't inventing stuff consistently, so they'd forget things they introduced. But I could go on about that. Point is, when this news came out back in February, we debated this on the forums and stuff, and no one really had a problem with it, and we barely consider it race swapping. Because the Dondarrions are one of the Marcher Lords from the Dornish Marches, the border mountains between the Stormlands and Dorne. Some people get confused by that. The Dornish Marches aren't in Dorne. They're the borderlands of the Stormlands facing Dorne. And if you read The World of Ice and Fire, they explain, well, the borders change constantly because the Dornish Marches are at the tri-point between the Stormlands, Dorne, and the Reach. So the borders have shifted constantly over the centuries. It's like the Welsh Marches, that they're these contested borders where you gain or lose one valley at a time per generation. It's slow going over the mountains, slogging over, fighting a siege to win one castle and one mountain in the borderland and up in the moors. It's just this contested border zone. And it produces the best fighters in Westeros as a result, because people are always fighting there. The thing about Barristan Selmy it comes from a Marcher house. Angie, the greatest archer that they have in the Brotherhood Without Banners, also from the Dornish Marches. And Criston Cole. That you see this in the books. They always turn out some of the best fighters from there because they're strong martial traditions that you have to be ready to fight. This is a heavy, conflicted border zone most of the time. Even under the Targaryen peace, they say we're facing the Dornish, and there's always border raids and stuff. So we didn't really consider this a race swap exactly, because it's not like, how could he be Asian? It's, there's a land border with Dorne. He is from the contested borderland, which happens to be held by Stormlanders now, but they say it's shifted borders constantly over the centuries. And then you get into the issue of, they do explain that, like, there aren't many Andals in the Red Mountains that are the border between Dorne and the Stormlands. They say it's mostly First Men families who have been there since forever. Even on the Dornish side, the Ironwoods, who are the big rivals of the Martells within Dorne, the Ironwoods are a First Men family. They said, well, when the Rhoynar migrated here, it wasn't even, that they mostly settled along the coasts, and it fades out as you get towards the mountains on a spectrum. But by the time you get to the Western Mountains, people from the Dornish marches, even the Dornish along the borders, they pretty much look white. Arthur Dayne, another one of the greatest warriors of his generation, while technically Dornish, not a Marcher Lord, he's from the border mountains, Arthur Dayne. The best fighters come from, because it's a border zone. So Arthur Dayne, when we saw him in the TV show, if you saw his photo, he looked Caucasian, because that's what he looks like in the books, because he's from the mountains, where the Rhoynar didn't settle. So it's like southern Spain versus northern Spain, just rotated 90 degrees, that it's Eastern Dorne versus Western Dorne, Eastern Dorne along the coast versus Western Dorne up in the mountains, where they're mostly first men. So there is a question of, well, even if the border shifted and the lands of House Dondarrion once belonged to the Ironwoods, they'd still look first men, wouldn't they? I think that's really getting specific. It's just armies have moved across and been granted to minor knights, and it's more of a generalization than a rule, that I wouldn't consider it impossible that a Marcher Lord, despite all that setup, I wouldn't, and most book fans wouldn't, consider it that unusual that a Marcher Lord from the Dornish marches in the Stormlands could have a bit of Rhoynar blood in him, going back on a scale of centuries. It's like, are people from, I don't know, Alsace-Lorraine, would you ask them, well, do you have, wait a minute, you're from Lorraine, but you have some German blood in you? Well, yeah, this was a border region. Or the Low Countries, wait a minute, you have some French blood in you? Well, yeah, this was a border region. The borders shifted over the centuries. And people, and I'm not even talking about war rape, it's just that people migrate, merchants setting up in a town, or just camp followers, people move, that it was the borders shift. So I don't really, no one really considered this implausible, that, okay, maybe a Marcher Lord from the Dornish marches could be, it's like someone from southern France looking a bit olive-skinned, and they say, well, because I'm on the border with Spain. That's a really good example of this, particularly because Dorne is their Spain, fantasy Spain. It's like someone from the Mediterranean coast of France, and you're like, why do you look kind of Spanish? Well, because the borders changed over the centuries, and there's the gene pool mixes around. No one really had a problem with this, particularly because Criston Cole is described as, tall, dark, and handsome in the books, and they never actually say he was olive-skinned, but because of his coal-black hair, I kind of always envisioned him as a little dark-complexioned. So that's the thing. But again, book fans, TV fans, whatever, when we got our first photo of Fabien Frankel, we all said, dear God, he looks exactly like what we envisioned Criston Cole looking like. So is that a problem? So it's a point of discussion. Please, I'm looking forward to everyone's discussion in the comments. I know I'm rambling about this, of was this race swapping that they're establishing that Criston Cole, they actually don't say he's Dornish. They say he is of Dornish descent, because they're not changing that House Cole is from the borderland. I'm curious how they're going to explain this in dialogue, in detail. My suspicion is they're going to say something like, have someone go, hey, are you part Dornish? Just looking at him, and he'll go, oh yeah, I think my grandmother was part Dornish or something. I didn't really know her. Something like that. That they're not saying he is a Dornish guy living in the Stormlands. They're saying of Dornish descent means he's mixed. He's got a little Dornish blood in his background. You just say something like, oh, I think one of my great-grandfathers on my mother's side was Dornish, but I didn't really know him. Just because the borders move all the time. So I can see that working. So it's strange that in the same casting announcement, we heard about Corlys Velaryon played by a black actor, Mysaria played by a mixed-race Asian actress, mixed race but looking East Asian, Japanese, British, and that Criston Cole is part Dornish in his background. But Corlys is the only one that people fixated on. And it just seems a little biased that, oh, well, he's black. Well, yeah, but I even made a whole argument, well, it's the narrow sea houses are kind of the borderland between Westeros and the free cities. That kind of makes sense to me. That's a separate argument. But that no one really fixated on Mysaria or Criston Cole just seems a bit uneven to me. But then again, it's compared to, well, how could someone be from the Summer Isles, or the Valyrians are strict about blood purity? Well, the lower-ranking ones weren't. Point is, I don't even... This is the least of these three in terms of controversy. Even Mysaria, well, she could be part Asian because she was a slave from the Eastern Continent. That Criston Cole is from the borderland between the Stormlands and Dorne, which has changed hands constantly over the centuries. Yeah, he probably has some Dornish ancestry in his background somewhere. We don't have a problem with that. I know I'm fixing us. I said I didn't have much to say about the actor, and as for the character, I've covered that. Just this was the one issue raised by HBO's casting. No one has a problem with it. He really looks like Criston, and I really think this is a good casting. The one issue this kind of touches on, which I'm not trying to stir up controversy, just we're debating this. Would people be upset at, well, the whitewashing question of that there is a bad history in Hollywood of casting ambiguously brown characters with like dark-skinned Italians or even Hispanic actors to claim they're some other race? Okay, what ethnicity is Star Trek's Khan in the original series as played by Ricardo Montalban? He's stated in dialogue to be a Sikh from India. And they have him played by a Latino actor, as was the fashion of the time. And he's a brilliant actor. And, he's a genetic Superman, so I think there's probably some mixing of his DNA in there, but whatever the case. Because when you improve a machine, you improve production like 20%. When you improve man, you make an improvement tenfold. And you have to respect Khan because, he ruled a quarter of the earth. He never fought a war that wasn't defensive. No major rebellions. He brought order to the world. But I digress. The point is, like how that famous commercial from the 70s of the crying Native American seeing someone littering was played by an Italian man. That there is a bad history of that you would have roles that were meant to be Latino or South Asian or something played by just a dark-skinned Italian person. And that whitewashing of it, and it's a mild form of blackface almost, and the race casting. It's confused when you come to Dorne, because a lot like Spain, they say, well, there have been different migrations and invasions, so it's racially mixed. That, like the South, the Moorish South versus the Asturian North in Spain. And for Dorne, as described in the books, well, they explain, well, it's a mishmash of Rhoynar First Men and a sprinkling of Andals. So when they cast Dorne, they cast a mix of Latino actors and Semitic actors, Arab actors, and even South Asian actors. But this already happened in Game of Thrones, and no one was complaining that, even though technically Latino people don't exist yet, because they don't have an Americas, but, it's inspired by, Hispanic, Spanish, that Pedro Pascal, his family is from Chile. He is a Hispanic man, but his brother, who we appreciated the casting, even if they didn't use him right, Alexander Siddig, he's, I think, half Libyan and half British. So he's mixed race, but Arab in there. And Ilaria's actress, who, again, we liked the casting when it happened in season 4, even if they misused it later. I think she's half Indian, subcontinent Indian, and half Swiss. So, and yet she's playing someone from pseudo-fantasy Spain. So I don't know if we can really rate. No one had an issue with this in the past, so I don't think we should in the future. And Dorne is a fantasy construct. But would people be upset that you have a dark-skinned white man playing a character who has a smidge of Dornish blood in him, but not a lot? So I looked up Fabien Frankel's background, And it actually turns out that his mother is French, and his father was from England, but his father is actually Jewish. And this is the weird thing. I checked this out. That Fabian's paternal grandmother, his father's mother, was from the Jewish community in Mumbai, India. So if you're going to go, well, this is a white actor playing a part Dornish character, even though Dornish is actually a spectrum of, well, he's from Western Dorne, where they don't look very Rhoynar. Well, the borderlands with, like I was saying at the beginning, all this setup that, well, the Ironwoods don't look very Rhoynar, so if he has some Ironwood blood in him from the borders shifting, he wouldn't need to look very non-white in terms of Semitic or Latino or something. And this is an open question for the comments. I don't have an answer. If people are going to complain, well, he's a white actor playing a character who's supposed to be part fantasy medieval Spain, which other actors, like the Ilaria Sand actress, was half Indian, can he say, well, I'm not white, in that he's not only Jewish? That's a whole separate issue, because there was a bad history of Jewish actors who were relatively dark-hued playing Eastern characters and stuff, but from the Middle East. But can you say he's not 100% white, in the sense that his grandmother was from the Jewish community of Mumbai? And I know I don't have access to DNA Finding Your Roots show type stuff. He's probably got some Mumbai Indian heritage in him. That's probably why I would assume he's got the relatively dark complexion to him. That's not because, oh, I'm an Italian or something. I think he's part Indian, like going back to the level of his great grandparents or something, because he's from the Jewish community of Mumbai through his grandmother. So I'm rambling just because this is an audio only thing. I don't really have, no one had a problem with his appearance, and there's the question of, no, you should worry about when you cast white actors to play non-white roles. Well, the borderland with Dorne isn't with very Rhoynar-looking people. And he'd have maybe a smidge of Rhoynar deep in the background somewhere, and this actor has a smidge of Mumbai, India, through intermarriage from the Jewish community of Mumbai. I don't know. He grew up in France. But I don't have a problem with that in this case. It raises that issue for discussion. I don't think anyone would raise a complaint about that. Everyone says this is what we thought Criston Cole looked like. And I think subconsciously, because he's from the Marches, when they said, well, he's dark-haired and is this tall, dark, and handsome guy, I guess I kind of assumed he had a bit of Dornish blood in him in the books, just because he's from that region. It's like a knight from the southern border of France with Spain. You would think that the borders have shifted. So I don't have a problem with this. It does raise some of those issues if you're concerned about it. I'm not trying to be insensitive, that some people would be legitimately concerned about this and, oh, I'm going woke over this. It's the only thing I can really have to discuss about Criston Cole and the casting of this. I think he's fine, and I don't think anyone would have a complaint. They've cast a hodgepodge of actors to play Dorne because Dorne is this mixed fantasy construct. Martin said it's sort of like a combination of medieval Spain and Wales. It's like the Welsh marches in Britain mixed with Spain. And it's actually sort of like Cornwall. I mean, Dornish, Cornish, that they're this other ethnicity out in this mountainous peninsula, and they're very different from the rest of the country. So I don't particularly have a problem with this. This touches on some sore points from the past when you go back to like fantasy movies from the 70s and 80s that really did whitewashing casting and casting just dark-skinned white people from Southern Europe to play Indian people or African people. That really, this gets into the whole debate over that. And I know that, Laurence Olivier in Othello was, that was an extreme example, but it touches on issues of that. I don't think anyone has a particular problem with this. Everyone seems to be focusing on Corlys Velaryon and the resulting changes to the Velaryons. And, I'm waiting to see how they play that. I would be upset if they say this is what the Velaryons always looked like, because that doesn't make sense. Because, going back into the mists of time, the way they seem to be saying that Corlys's own mother was a Summer Islander. Why wouldn't she be? It wouldn't make as much sense if they weren't, like, the idea is that they went out to the outer colonies, then acculturated with the locals and intermarried with them. Okay. Versus, oh, we look like this all the time. No, the example I use is a Roman family that moved to Britain and intermarried with the locals to the point that they don't quite look Italian anymore, compared to Romans living in Rome. That the Velaryons, before they moved to the outer provinces, this is before they had intermarried, so they wouldn't look like that. So I'm waiting for the explanation they give for the Velaryons and for Criston, if there's like a line of dialogue where he says, oh yeah, I think my great-grandmother was Dornish or something, but I didn't really know her. That I got a little Dornish blood in me. But whatever, because our big fear when they picked Dance of the Dragons, the one big shortcoming of this compared to any other prequel is it is the least diverse of any of the prequels in terms of race. And there's women, there's LGBT characters in it, but it's mostly in the core regions of the Seven Kingdoms. The Free Cities come into it a bit. Dorne isn't really in it unless you work them in with the Free City subplot. That you want some aspects of this, and the bigger question is if Dorne will be part of the Stepstones War that they're going to be filming for season 1. Hard to say. But when we were sitting around, remember, this is a video I wanted to make back in February, that when we were sitting around going, well, how could they work some racial diversity into this show that wouldn't be just making stuff up that breaks the rules of the storyverse, but that we could fit things in well. And like even the book fans who were the handful of book fans who were really against Corlys being part black, didn't have a problem with, oh, you're from the Borderlands with Dorne, say he's part Dornish as a result. That's elegant in its simplicity, and gets more diversity in here, that they're not all a bunch of blonde-haired, blue-eyed guys on the Kingsguard. So I am okay with this. It raises more questions than answers, and again, heterosexual white male aged 18 to 45, is it really my place to discuss this? Because I've heard people from both ends of the argument, black fans, Latino fans, I have seen in comments on both sides of the argument. So I don't know what to think. That there's a spectrum of opinions on, well, yeah, you can have a multiracial actor play that, versus, no, why didn't they get someone else to play this? There's plenty of actors out there. Spectrum of opinions out there. It's not my place. I'm just trying to present the discussion so we have something to talk about. But overall, I'm pretty happy with this casting of Fabien Frankel as Criston Cole. He looks exactly like what I envision him looking like. And I'm really happy that he's got that stage combat degree, because he's going to be doing a lot of that.